as we mentioned in our last video, we're finishing off with the M1 Garand. As General George S. Patton put it, how did he say that?
Greatest battle implement ever devised by man, or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What really is behind that statement is the fact that the Garand really brought self-loading or semi-automatic function in a practical sense to the arms of the soldier. And this really was, during the Second World War, issued to the U.S. troops. But as we've touched on along the way, again with a Canadian connection.
They were issued to Canadians for Special Service Force. Generally speaking, they used the Lee Enfield, but Canadians did use the Garand as well. Limited, but it was a semi-automatic self-loading rifle using an en bloc clip, holding 8 rounds of .30-06, and you would clock the action back there. So the action would stay back, and the soldier would put this in, push it down, and remove his thumb. Otherwise, you get what they call Garand thumb. It'll take the tip off your finger, your thumb. So you would push it down, you'd hear a click, and you smack the operating rod home, and you were loaded, ready to go. So you had 8 rounds, as fast as you could pull the trigger, which gave the Americans a fair degree of excess firepower over the bolt-operated military rifles then in use. So this was adopted by the Americans in 1936.
But designed by a Canadian.
John Garand, yes, who worked at Springfield for all his career, 1919, I think, to 1953. So he helped with the M14 as well, which is much later. This fixed a bayonet. Early in the war, you'd use the 1903 Springfield bayonet. The Americans found that to be quite cumbersome, so they took the bulk of these and created the M1 bayonet, which is a lot handier.
There was a lot of experimentation with the gas system to allow it to be reliable, and as well, as you can see, it is fed by on-block clips. And some of the original concepts, there were some ideas around different feeding mechanisms, but in the view of the time, this really combined the profile and simplicity of the bolt action in terms of the top feed stripper clip type design with a self-loading rifle. Now, as well, there was some thought given to the deployment of the ammunition itself, and the production of these on-block clips in simple stamped formation like this allowed you to easily store and carry the ammunition as well as load it too. Now, in the future, people looked to this and saw it as a little bit of a limitation, and that's why you see in future firearms the application of a box-type magazine that is removable, but for the time, a great innovation.
Yeah. And they were not meant to be reused. The Americans didn't reuse all that much, but they would spring out of there when you were done firing, and then you would simply load another one. Again, it gave the soldier a lot of firepower very quickly, as opposed to the bolt action system.
Yeah, the progression in warfare at that time was kind of interesting. In through the Great War, aimed fire was really sought after. Many of the bolt actions, like the #1 Mark III, would actually limit the soldiers to only loading 1 round at a time. And the belief at that point was if you gave them this type of free access to ammunition, it would be utterly wasted. Now, what they quickly learned is when you put someone into, essentially a theater of warfare, that ammunition is quickly wasted, and it's more important to allow them to be able to have that kind of access. So a lot of cutoff devices were removed, we went from what would have been about 1,000 rounds fired per casualty in the Great War to like that, yeah, up in around 10,000 rounds, I believe, a casualty during the Second World War, and that grew as warfare progressed through the years. You think about U.S. involvement in the Second World War, you think of the Garand. It was issued in both the European and Pacific conflicts.
And the Russians rushed to get a semi-automatic rifle. The Germans did in their G43. So this kind of introduced the idea of a self-loading rifle for every major army, such as the United States. So everybody was trying to catch up at that point.
Yes, and it saw many variations, including a sniper version of it.
There's a sniper version.
Model M1D, and had an effective engagement from, anywhere from 50 yards out to 800-900. Practically, you were probably limited to about 6 or 7.
Yeah. Most infantry engagements, typically an infantryman cannot see effectively at 600 or 700 yards. They would engage at 300, 200, and in the First War, the trenches were 100 yards apart. You could almost throw a grenade into them. So this rifle it's a full rifle caliber, and it could reach out 1,800 yards, but you never engaged at that because you can't see that far usually as an infantryman.
Yes, and the sights were representative of that. They went out to about 1,100, but practically were used up to about 3.
Yes, and in the jungle, a lot closer than that.
Yes. So the M1 Garand, again, another iconic piece with a little bit of a Canadian connection.